Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 237th anniversary of the United States Marine Corps. We welcome all Marines, both past and present, and friends of the Marine Corps to share in these moments as we pay tribute to the birth of our Corps. All of you are special guests of the Marines Memorial tonight, but we're especially proud to have with us as our guest of honor George Pratt Schultz, accompanied by his lovely wife Charlotte. George Schultz is a Marine who served in the Pacific in World War II, and you'll hear more about his career later. Tonight, in addition to our guest of honor, we're blessed to have with us Vice Admiral and Mrs. Paul Zunkuft, who we call Admiral Z, and he's the commander of the Coast Guard Pacific area, which is really half the Coast Guard. We have Major General and Mrs. O.K. Steele, who came in from Grass Valley, and from Dallas, Texas, Major General and Mrs. Don Lynch, one of my oldest and closest friends. We have with us tonight also television's man of many talents and the star of the TV show Dirty Jobs, Mr. Mike Grove with Sandy. And we have our association board of directors led by Steve Snyder, our chairman, and General Joe Hoare, the vice chairman, and their ladies, and the other members of the board of directors. And I will ask you, these are all volunteers, and they do so much for veterans and for the currently serving men and women in the armed forces. Please give a hand for our board of directors. As you entered the theater this evening, you should have noticed an empty chair and a single lone table draped in black, signifying our fallen comrades who are not with us this evening, because they've given the full measure of devotion to our country and to our beloved Corps. The single lighted candle reminds us of the flame of eternal life. The Purple Heart Medal is displayed to reflect the shedding of blood in battle. The identification tags are blank, yet they could bear the names of any of us here tonight. In fighting our nation's enemies, some have paid the ultimate, joining the honor roll of heroes who built the legacy of our Corps. It is our obligation to honor those fallen Marines. Though our fallen can no longer participate in our traditions, they will always be part of us and who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask if you bow your heads for a moment of silence for our fallen comrades. Thank you. Here at the Marines Memorial, we're heavily involved in Fleet Week. And you know, at the end of Fleet Week this year, we had a wonderful ceremony here in the theater and a reception upstairs. And during the course of the reception, our guest of honor's wife, Charlotte, said it would sure be nice to have a Marine Corps band at our birthday ball. Well, that simple statement reverberated through Camp Pendleton and all through Headquarters Marine Corps. Because, you know, at that point, a month ago, every Marine Corps band had already been obligated for some kind of ceremony on the Marine Corps birthday, 10 November. But yesterday, part of the 1st Marine Division band showed up here. Yeah. You know, some people, like Charlotte, seem to get to know how to get things done. Thank you, Charlotte. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming a special ensemble from the 1st Marine Division Band here to play Stars and Stripes Forever, the National March of the United States of America, written by the former director of the United States Marine Band, John Philip Sousa. Just give him a big hand. In a minute, we'll have the invocation. First, a few words about our chaplain tonight. And I have to tell you, when I came back from my second tour in Vietnam, the Marine Corps assigned me to the Naval Academy to teach midshipmen. And they didn't have housing, so I was living in the bachelor officer quarters. And at that time, they had a closed mess. And every evening, the officers would get together and have dinner in that closed mess. And there was another officer who had just come back from Vietnam, the assistant chaplain at the Naval Academy, Lieutenant Carol Starling, United States Navy. And he and I would have dinner together, and we'd share pictures of our children. I'd show him pictures of my daughters, and he'd show me pictures of his sons. And he was so proud of his 5-year-old son, Christopher. Well, I just saw Carol Starling the first time in 40 years tonight, and I gave him a big hug. Yeah. Yeah. He's a retired Navy captain, had a great career in the Navy, and he doesn't have to pull a photo out of his wallet tonight to show me his son, because his son's here too. His son is Colonel Christopher Starling, United States Marine Corps, the commanding officer of the 23rd Marines, who are going to be putting on our ceremony tonight. I'd like to honor the Starlings. Please stand up, the Starlings. And the bride, Suzanne, too. If I could ask Padre Starling to come forth here and give us our invocation.
Let us pray. Tonight, O Lord, on this day so special to so many of us, we would offer 3 words of prayer. First, we say thanks. Thanks for those who all our lives have sustained us with their love and support. Thanks for the legacy of Marines who went before us, whose deeds of courage and sacrifice ennoble all of us who follow in their wake. Next, we ask for you to bless. Bless those Marines serving today in far-off difficult situations. Be with them amid the perils and dangers they face, and suffer not their courage to fail. And bless with faith and perseverance those who bear the scars of war, and those compassionate caregivers who labor to restore and heal them. Last, we pray that you will guide, as Marines everywhere serve on our behalf, guide our leaders and our people, that our nation may continue to grow into the promise for human good that attended its birth, that together we may contribute to a better nation, a more promising future, and a more peaceful world. Thanks, bless, and guide, O Lord. These 3 things we ask in your strong and holy name. Amen.
Seen a summer day that slowly opens like a rose along a quiet road that wanders by, and I have smiled and wondered where it goes. Have stumbled through the night alone, as any man can be, then found a silent canyon full of stars, and in my heart I heard them telling me I am home. The gentle winds, the rains that fall, the tallest trees, I'm part of it all. I've seen the silver mountain tops and golden prairies on my way. Now everywhere I go across the land, I stand so proudly in the sun and say, I am home. The gentle winds, the rains that fall, the tallest trees, I'm part of it all. I've dreamed of Eden all my life. I find it more and more each day. Now everywhere I go across the land, I stand so proudly in the sun and say, I am home.
I want to thank Captain Starling for that invocation, and thank you, Eric Stratman, for that song, and thank you, Randall Benway at the piano. Eric's performed that song at least 15 years now, and it's a tradition at the ball, and we appreciate him so much. We're going to begin this memorable evening with a tribute to our guest of honor. A Marine has done so many marvelous things in his life. This tribute was written by and will be performed by Mr. Peter Arnott. Peter.
Thank you. Good evening. Once upon a time, as the saying goes, in the mythical village of San Francisco, a dashing male executive meets a sparkling female chief of protocol. Both are single. And with music and laughter and dancing, don't forget dancing, it's not too long before George and Charlotte Schultz embark on an enchanting fairy tale that continues to delight everyone, everywhere. Today, George Schultz is well known in this city by the bay, but for a more personal and way more informal look, let's take a few minutes to travel east several thousand miles and on a whirlwind time machine travel back several decades to briefly tell you something about the life of this fabled Marine, and to revisit some of the events which shaped his life in a way that affected the lives of every one of you in this room tonight. In fact, I think it can be said affected everyone in the world. All begins 92 years ago in 1920. Names in the news are Babe Ruth, Miss America, heavyweight fighter Jack Dempsey. But in New York, just before Christmas on December 13th, another new name appears, destined to make those folks not very well recognized at all. The name is George Pratt Schultz. The fact that young George on Prohibition arrived in the same year is purely coincidental, we think. Growing up during the Depression, young George, ever the forward thinker, decides on a scheme to go into the publishing business, offering his paper for 5 cents a copy, until a neighbor points out, why pay a nickel for local news when for the same nickel you can buy the New York Times? Although it's not recorded, it may be at this time that our young boy decides to stop practicing business and to start teaching it. In high school, young George excels in sports. In basketball, he plays forward. He's number 3 up there, just to the right of the boy holding the ball. In football, he's a back. In baseball, he's the catcher and the team captain. So as he enters college, he decides to give his body to Princeton football, but has to quit when Princeton football gives him his body back with a bad knee. Then on December 7th, 1941, 1 week before his 21st birthday, George hears that his country is now at war with Japan, and he rushes to New York to enlist. But he's persuaded to finish school. 6 months later, this Princeton graduate, summa cum laude, immediately signs up to be a Marine. And next year, Lieutenant Schultz, Marine Lieutenant Schultz, is assigned to an anti-aircraft unit in the Pacific, where while on leave in Hawaii, he meets an Army nurse, Helena O'Brien, known as Obi, and both begin to hear wedding bells. The end of the war will find them married, once again civilians, and living in the Boston area, where our former Princeton man is now an MIT man, where he'll soon be named an assistant professor of economics. And the Schultz household is now beginning to get crowded with the arrival of a daughter, Margaret, second daughter, Kathleen, and the Schultz's first son, Peter. And the assistant professor with a growing family now begins to offer consulting services on a part-time basis until economist Arthur Burns is appointed by President Eisenhower to head up a Council of Economics in Washington, D.C. And Burns asked our MIT assistant professor if he would take a year's sabbatical to join his staff. It's a pivotal move in the Schultz adventure, as the former Marine, for the first time, but definitely not the last, moves his family to Washington, D.C. to once again serve his country. And when he returns once again to the academic world, Schultz is offered a full professorship at the University of Chicago, where he will eventually be appointed the Dean of the University of Chicago School of Business. Since they are now expecting a fourth child, the Schultzes need a Chicago home with lots of rooms. They end up with a former rooming house, but it's on the south side of Chicago, not a very elegant area, and needs a lot of work, but it's the best that they can afford. Much later, in a book called This is Chicago, the Schultz's new house will be pictured as a before and after example of slum housing renovation. The house they've just bought will sit over the caption, "Before." But now it's the answer to their dreams, as just a short time after George's 37th birthday, a fourth child is born, a daughter, Barbara, who will be joined in a couple of years by a fifth and final Schultz child, the second son, Alex. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Dean Schultz and his family take a year's sabbatical as they move for the first time to the West Coast, as they move to Stanford, where George will join the Center for Advanced Studies, and the whole family settles in. Then comes a phone call from Southern California. So in a phone booth in a Stanford hallway, our business school dean learns that he's being considered for the cabinet post of Richard Nixon's Secretary of Labor. And suddenly, there's a whole new chapter in the life of George Schultz, as his voice is now heard and heeded when discussing the future of his country. And these are the years that things begin to move quickly for George Schultz, because Congress now creates something new, the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. And President Nixon appoints as the first ever OMB director his Secretary of Labor, George Shultz. From here, the Secretary of the OMB will move to become Secretary of the Treasury, where his first act will be to buy the first 1,000 $1 bills with his name on them, and then give them to his friends as gifts. Schultz's next major career move begins when a longtime friend, Steve Bechtel, asked the secretary if he'd like to join his company. And so, the former secretary of both the Treasury and Labor, the founding director of the OMB, the former dean of the Chicago School of Business at age 53, begins now to make his mark in the business world. Until two busy presidents get together. U.S. President Reagan in Camp David has an offer for Bechtel President Schultz in London. When informed who's on the phone, the Bechtel president immediately goes to the U.S. Embassy in London, where the line is more secure. Then after a quick conversation with his wife, he accepts President Reagan's offer and once again ably serves his country as the new Secretary of State. Well, it's a whirlwind tour, and we've now arrived at 2012, this room, tonight. George Schultz is now honorary chairman of the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy and chair of the Advisory Council of the President's Institute for Energy Efficiency and chair of the MIT Energy Initiative External Advisory Board and chair of the Hoover Institution's Schultz-Stevenson Task Force on Energy Policy, and with a small group of dedicated experts, he channels his considerable energy toward creating a world free of nuclear weapons. And now, with George Shultz just 1 month away from his 92nd birthday, now with a room full of honors, an imagination full of ideas, a calendar full of important projects, and a world full of friends and admirers, he continues to work and live not only in the present, but in the future. So finally, what can you say about a veteran Marine whose life is so full of accomplishments? In addition to government and corporate honors, here's what his children remember. A father who conducts scary ghost rides in a car that always seems to be mysteriously running out of gas. A father who's always accessible no matter what his title. A father who can discipline with only a look of disappointment. A father who will always listen. A father who dons a Santa Claus suit at Christmas time to delight his young grandchildren. George Pratt Schultz is described variously as a loving man, a gentle man, a determined man, a quiet man, a humorous man. A man who started out to serve his country as a Marine and rose steadily to serve his country at the highest levels of government. But at the foundation of it all, one thing seems perfectly clear. George Shultz is a family man who includes as part of his family and his family obligations the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesties, above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriot dreams that see beyond the years. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Every year, the President Commandant provides each command a message for all Marines past and present, their families and friends. Ladies and gentlemen, a message from the 35th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General James F. Amos.
Our forefathers made very clear that our democracy would only survive if there were individuals who were willing to give something back to this country, to be able to dedicate themselves to what this democracy and our freedom are all about. And the fact that there are young men and women who are willing to make that kind of sacrifice, to give something back to this country, is what makes America strong. God bless you and God bless the Marines.
Since our first call to duty 237 years ago, Marines have established a reputation as bold innovators and elite warriors, anchored by our sense of honor and love of country. The service of Marines during conflict, peace, and uncertainty has demonstrated an ageless ethos of fidelity and courage that has established who we are.
The State Department confirmed the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi, Libya, was under attack.
An ambassador to that country was murdered last night along with 3 other
City
Americans.
of Benghazi, the second attack on overseas U.S.
Marine
facilities.
rapid response team sent to Libya.
A Marine team is now making its way to Sudan to deal with the
U.S. Marine
aftermath.
rapid response team is in Yemen's capital following the violent attacks on the U.S.
Our nation has come to understand that when a crisis occurs or security is threatened, Marines respond quickly and unfailingly. We accomplish the mission, not most of the time, but every time. This is who we are. This is our legacy.
Responding to crisis with the same tenacity of today's United States Marines, the leathernecks of our greatest generation answered the clarion call 70 years ago. Exactly 8 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, more than 19,000 Marines and sailors landed on the Japanese-held southern Solomon Islands. The ensuing battle for Guadalcanal would begin a hard-fought and epic 6-month campaign that would mark a turning point in the Second World War.
Guadalcanal was probably one of the most important battles to really occur during World War II. It was the very first ground offensive that was going to be conducted against the Imperial Empire of Japan. The most important thing about Guadalcanal was it really did turn back the tide.
Naval parity against the Japanese had been achieved at the pivotal battles of Coral Sea and at Midway. At the time the battle for Guadalcanal and Tulagi began, Japanese forces in the Pacific remained strong, capable, and confident of victory. At the same time, U.S. forces were still in a vulnerable state, having suffered tremendous casualties in the 8 months since Pearl Harbor. In the late summer of 1942, upon learning Japanese forces were building an airfield in the southern Solomons, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff made the decision to seize the key islands of Guadalcanal and Tulagi. Although newly arrived in the Pacific, the 1st Marine Division, under the command of Major General Alexander Vandegrift, was selected to make the critical landings.
Henderson Field was essential. It was an unsinkable flat top. Without it, we had no air defense at all.
During 1 week in late August and early September alone, some 5,000 Imperial troops landed and were thrown against the Marines' defensive perimeter. The constant attacks tested resolve, but the line was held. Marines endured not only relentless attacks from the Japanese, but also malaria, dysentery, short supplies, and the harsh tropical climate of the South Pacific.
And then the natives came in and told us that a couple thousand Japanese had landed at Tasamboko. Edson asked permission to go, and we destroyed Kawaguchi, destroyed his rear echelon. We captured his heavy weapons, and we captured all of his food stuff. We were ordered back to amphibious area where Vandegrift had his headquarters. Edson wanted to stay and tackle the tail end of Kawaguchi's brigade that was headed up toward Henderson Field.
Here at Alligator Creek, at Bloody Ridge, the Matanikaw River, and in the skies over Guadalcanal, combat legends like Lou Diamond, Merritt Red Mike Edson, John Basilone, Mitchell Page, and Harold Bauer demonstrated the grit and tenacity for which leathernecks are known.
The Marines taught us to be men, really. We were young boys. They taught us to be men and to work with each other, to accept the hardships with each other, and also any glory that there might be or anything like that. It was a tremendous help.
The total cost of the Guadalcanal campaign was high. On the ground, almost 1,600 officers and men were killed. 1,152 of them were United States Marines. The wounded numbered almost 5,000. The Japanese, in turn, lost close to 25,000 men on Guadalcanal to combat, illness, wounds, and starvation.
As significant as the physical destruction of Japanese forces by a combined arms team was, the Guadalcanal campaign was also a psychological victory for the American public. On a level playing field, the best forces of the Japanese Empire had been defeated.
As we pay homage to that victory of 70 years ago, we reflect on the personal courage and sacrifice of those who fought on Guadalcanal. Now memorialized with humble headstones and name inscriptions like these here at the American Cemetery in the Philippines, we honor and remember those who gave so much.
Guadalcanal was their last offensive action. After Guadalcanal, the Japanese were on the defensive throughout the Pacific.
Following the repulse of the Japanese counterattack early in the battle, General Vandergrift described his young Marines by saying, "These youngsters are the darndest people you ever saw when they get started." With the same spirit as the Marines of World War II, who fought for honor and for country, today's Marines, nearly all who joined since 9/11, continue to follow the colors into harm's way, knowing full well what the hardships they will endure.
We started taking machine gun fire from multiple positions. Our heavy guns, our 50 caliber Mark 19, started engaging. I was posted up into rear security, and as I was doing so, I heard some arguing going around a tall wall. I popped that corner. I shot 2 bursts, about 15 rounds apiece. I went right behind the corner to reload, and I saw a machine gun barrel come around the corner. So I grabbed it, I punched the guy, threw him up against the wall.
The combat valor, confident professionalism, and selfless commitment of today's Marines stand with any in our history. All of us in the Marine Corps family realize our role as America's premier crisis response force. We remain the first to fight. We will continue to be faithful to our nation and to one another, and never take for granted the blessed liberty our country has given us.
My service, I feel, is dedicated to those young Marines, the ones that are really putting their lives out there on the line. The 17, 18, 20-year-old that raises his right hand and says, "I'll volunteer for my country."
And it's all about protecting people who need protection. And when you need support, you call the Marines, and the Marines go in and they do a phenomenal, phenomenal job.
He's chosen to become a United States Marine, and to be, to choose a selfless career of service and sacrifice. I'm humbled by that choice that he's made.
We serve, we all sacrifice. We have the eagle, globe, and anchor tattooed on our soul. In the last 10 years of war, nearly 14,000 Marines have given more. And despite their wounds, they're not done giving. They're not done living. They're thriving.
I truly believe I do more now than I did before I was injured. So minus 2 legs, I am a wounded warrior who's going to Georgetown in snowboards. And those kind of things they're not quantifiable. They're just absolutely remarkable. And it's not because of me, it's because of the wounded warrior support.
Like all Marines, our wounded warriors live life to the fullest. Participating in sports, they regain their self-confidence and remember again the value of being on a team. They also continue to give back. Some return to their active units, while others succeed in business, and even more return to school. Regardless of hardships resulting from their wounds, these warriors demonstrate some of the purest qualities of Marine selflessness.
I believe every Marine from boot camp gets taught that you don't represent yourself anymore. You represent your country, you represent the Marine Corps, and you represent, most importantly, the ideals that the Marine Corps puts first.
Just remember that there's no limitations to what you can do. Those guys at Walter Reed are proving that every day. For the rest of the Marine Corps, just remember that those guys are still your brothers, and they're out there still fighting the fight every day.
As we celebrate this year's birthday, take time to reflect on all our Corps has accomplished. Remember those who fought on Guadalcanal. Honor the sacrifice of our many brothers and sisters, and remember those that have gone before. Continue to do great deeds and endure.
I'm proud to protect my country and to serve in the footsteps of those men and women who have served before me. I'm forever grateful for those who have given the ultimate sacrifice and for those men and women who still continue to sacrifice.
Our Corps will continue to be defined by our ability to successfully respond to the world's most challenging and chaotic situations. For honor and for country, we'll maintain our world-class standards of discipline, always remembering who we are. Take pride in all that you've accomplished, and know that Sergeant Major Barrett and I appreciate your enduring fidelity, your hard work, and your sacrifice. Happy birthday, Marines, and Semper Fidelis.
Sound! Attention! Sound! Action call!
Ladies and gentlemen, our national colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please join Eric Stratton in the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Order! So!
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. On November 1st, 1921, John A. Lejeune, 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps, directed that a reminder of the honorable service of the Corps be published by every command to all Marines throughout the globe on the birthday of the Corps. Since that day, Marines have continued to distinguish themselves on many battlefields and foreign shores, in war and peace. On this birthday of the Corps, therefore, in compliance with the will of the 13th Commandant, Article 38, United States Marine Corps Manual Edition of 1921, is republished as follows.
On November 10, 1775, the Corps of Marines was created by a resolution of the Continental Congress. Since that date, many thousands of men have borne the name Marine. In memory of them, it is fitting that we who are Marines should commemorate the birthday of our Corps by calling to mind the glory of its long and illustrious history. The record of our Corps is one which will bear comparison with that of the most famous military organizations in the world's history. During 90 of the first 146 years of its existence, the Marine Corps has been in action against the nation's foes. From the Battle of Trenton to the Argonne, Marines have won foremost honors in war and in the long eras of tranquility at home. Generation after generation of Marines have grown great in war in both hemispheres and in every corner of the 7 seas, that our country and its citizens might enjoy peace and security. In every battle and skirmish since the birth of our Corps, Marines have acquitted themselves with the greatest distinction, winning new honors on each occasion until the term Marine has come to signify all that is highest in the military efficiency and soldierly virtue. This high name of distinction and soldierly repute, we who are Marines today have received from those who have preceded us in the Corps. With it, we also received from them the eternal spirit which has animated our Corps from generation to generation and has been the distinguishing mark of Marines in every age. So long as the spirit continues to flourish, Marines will be found equal to every emergency in the future as they have been in the past. And the men of our nation will regard us as worthy successors to the long line of illustrious men who have served as soldiers of the sea since the founding of the Corps.
The inspiring message of our 13th Commandant has left its mark in the hearts and minds of all Marines, by deed and by act, from Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, from the Enchon to the Korean armistice, and interventions from Lebanon to the Dominican Republic, from the opening battles of Vietnam to the Maigis rescue, in Desert Storm and enduring freedom. Marines have continued to emphasize those qualities which are their legacy. The success that they have achieved in combat and the faith they have borne in peace will continue. The Commandant and our many friends have added their hearty praise and congratulations on this, our 237th birthday. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for honors to Secretary Schultz. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman of the Board of Marines Memorial Association, Mr. Steve Snyder.
Marines and honored guests, it is my distinct pleasure to present to you our distinguished honoree this evening, Secretary George P. Schultz.
Well, this is very impressive here. But I want to tell you one thing. We Marines know how to have a good time, too. I can remember once during the war, World War II, we came back from an island we'd taken into Kauai for a little R&R and regrouping for the next operation. A few of us got together and we said, hey, this is a big island. If it's a big island, there must be a hospital. If it's a hospital, there must be nurses. Well, let's go find a hospital. Actually, that's where I met my late wife, Obie, who I met her there, and after the war we got married, so sometimes it pays off to go find a hospital. All these experiences you have as a Marine stick with you. And let me tell you a couple that had a big influence on my outlook. I think we all remember boot camp. Yeah. Well, I remember the day, you all remember the day a sergeant gives you your rifle. And he says, take good care of this rifle, it's your best friend. But remember one thing, never point this rifle at anybody unless you're willing to pull the trigger. No empty threats. I told that story to President Reagan when I was in office with him. And we tried to be very careful with what we said because we wanted everybody to know that we meant it. If you say something is unacceptable and then when it happens you accept it with no consequences, well, you don't have any credibility. So be careful and remember what that sergeant said. Never point this rifle at anybody unless you're willing to pull the trigger. Big, big lesson with big implications. Of course, then I remember our little landing on Nanumea. I was up in a little island called Funafuti. I'm a second lieutenant. There's ships everywhere, lots of people. Something's going on. I don't know what, but it's obviously something. Turned out it was the gathering that would later go on to the Tarawa operation. And all of a sudden, somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, Lieutenant, you're going to take your battalion, get on a destroyer, and you're going to go up to a little island called Nanumea, and you're going to disembark in the darkness, land before daylight. Island is lightly held by the Japanese. You take the island, then we come, and it was going to be a medevac island. So we get on the destroyer, we go up, we get off. And as happened all too many cases, the tide is out. Boats can't get anywhere near the island, so we have to disembark from our little boats and wade with our rifles. Ready on, and you're going over coral reefs, you know, they got big holes in them, so you have to go very carefully and slowly. By the time we get to the shore, it's daylight. And I see some natives on the shore. And one of them has a white robe on, so I go up to him. I'd learned a little Polynesian, so I said to him, in good morning American Polynesian, I said, Talofa Soli. He looks at me and says, good morning, Lieutenant. We have been expecting you. The Japanese left 2 days ago. It was a hell of a landing. But actually, by almost noontime, they were back. And there was only one structure of any moment on the island. It was a church, and it had big walls. And they came back with their bombers and so on. We're completely defenseless. We have nothing. So somebody says, the church, I yell out, disperse. So we disperse. They put a bomb in the dead center of that church. So I said to my guys afterwards, we learned two things. Number one, never underestimate your adversary. They're pretty good marksmen. Number two, don't do what they expect you to do. So it was a good lesson. But later we're getting ready to defend ourselves more as the people are coming in, the Seabees are coming in, they're trying to make an airfield, and we're trying to set up our anti-aircraft. And the Japanese are coming at us. And we had some real action going on. And you know, you get very close to everybody. And I had one friend, a Sergeant Patton, a terrific guy, wonderful human being and capable. I relied on him. And I'm looking around for him, and I run over to where I thought he might be. I said, "Where the hell is Cap Patton?" "Patton's dead, sir." I remember that moment forever. Because all of a sudden, with all the glamour, whatever, the reality of war sinks in. So I always remember that moment when I'm President Reagan's Secretary of State, and we're confronting the Cold War problems in the Soviet Union and so on. And I'm saying to myself, remember Sergeant Patton, and we're going to commit ourselves, commit our forces. Be careful. Let's be sure we have a mission that's important and worthwhile. Let's be sure we equip our people and give them a chance to win. We're in there to win. We're not in there to lose. It's a basic lesson that I learned from the tragedy of Sergeant Patton. There are all these things that take place in your life as a Marine that have enduring impact on what you do. And I suppose the biggest thing you do as a Marine is you stand up and salute the flag and love your country, love your family, love the United States Marine Corps. Semper Fi.
Please be seated. Traditionally, regardless of the location, Marines pause to observe the birthday by sharing a cake and usually a holiday meal. The sword is used to cut the cake as a reminder that we are a band of warriors committed to carrying the sword so that our nation may live in peace. The first piece of cake is presented to the guest of honor, an outstanding recognition of his service to our country. The second piece of cake is presented to the eldest Marine present this evening, demonstrating the honor and respect according to experience and seniority. Representing the oldest Marine tonight is Major George W. Parker, Jr., United States Marine Corps retired, born October 19, 1918. The third piece of cake is given to the eldest Marine to pass to the youngest Marine present, symbolizing the passing of tradition from the eldest to the younger. The youngest Marine present tonight is Corporal Noe Regulus, who resides from New Jersey. Corporal Regulus graduated MCRD Paris Island on January 11, 2009, and was born December 21, 1989. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the retirement of the colors.
Retired colors! Presents! Full! Mark time! Mark!
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. I want to thank the 1st Marine Division Band. I think you ought to come back every year. This is great. I want to thank Eric Stratman. Wasn't he wonderful tonight? Thank Eric. And Randall on the piano. Randall, thank you. And our bagpiper, Ozzie Reed. Thank you, Ozzie. And really a special hand for that program that Peter Arnott wrote and performed tonight in a tribute to our guest of honor. Peter Arnott, thank you so much. The 23rd Marine Regiment, those Marines, weren't they, notice there were no officers up there. They did it wonderfully. I want to thank the 23rd Marines and the staff NCOs for putting that on. That was terrific. And Secretary Schultz, you and Charlotte, thank you so much honoring us with your presence tonight. Your talk was wonderful and heartfelt. We thank you.